Hey, closet busters, come on and gather around. It's time once again to kick down those closet doors of life. We're here to escape our BS, explore our fears, and elevate our self-expression. I'm your host, Rick Clemens, bold move expert and coming out coach, and I'm going to take you to the party, the pulpit, the wake, and back to the party of living your life uncloseted. So come on, grab hold of yourself and get ready to step out, step up, and step into living your truth as we explore more stories, tips, and tricks for living your life uncloseted. Now let's get to the show. Hey, Life Uncloseted family. It is time once again for an episode of Life Uncloseted. And I'm going to be really honest here. If you're not into maybe some things that are going to push your limits, that are going to get you to think differently about things, especially in the sexual arena, I'm going to be really honest, this may not be the conversation for you, but I would invite you to stick around and listen, because sometimes we've got to deal with the stuff and look at things that make us really, really uncomfortable. And today I've got a former guest on my show who's a filmmaker, and he has got a really interesting new movie out. It's an indie type film that is from his production company, Breaking Glass Pictures, and all I can tell you is the breeding is going to make you question things. And it's also going to align with what's going on somewhat in our political climate here in the US and around the globe about race and the focus of what race is bringing into our lives. Everything from Jussie Smollett to sex and everything else. And I love this movie. I haven't seen it. I've watched the trailer and I thought I'm going to come into this very blind, so to speak, because I know what race play is. I know what fetishes are, but I'm so glad that Daniel Armando has done this film, because I think it has some opportunities to open up conversations, to expose some things, and more importantly, literally, to talk about how race influences so much of our lives. So welcome back to another episode, man, of being with me. Last time it was the Coming Out Lounge, but here we are. We've kind of revamped, and now it's Life Uncloseted. And I'm serious, man. When you and I reconnected on Facebook, I was like, okay, cool, let's do something. And then when you sent it to me, I'm like, okay, we're going to do this, because it is, I love pushing boundaries, number one.
Yeah.
And there is an element of this conversation that I think is going to get us into that space. So let's uncloset racism and all this other stuff. So let's start by, the last film I think I did with you was Daddy's Boy.
Daddy's Boy,
again was like, it kind of pushed some, spaces right there, and it actually was one of my most listened to podcasts a couple of years ago.
Oh, wow.
So I don't think I ever shared that with you, but yeah, I was looking at the stats the other day, and it's so interesting because I can see the stats of what people listen to, and even in present day, in the last few months, that one has been downloaded another 40 to 50 times. So it's interesting to see.
That's awesome.
Even as things are, in the quote archive, so to speak, even though I don't archive anything, it's interesting to see what people find and listen to. So let's kind of go forward. Your production company is Breaking Glass Pictures. You're the film.
Nova's production. So
Nova's production. Okay. And so who is Breaking Glass then?
They're the ones who picked it up and distributed it.
Oh, nice.
So they were the brave ones who watched it and said, you know what, we'll put it out.
Cool. Because this is really, it is kind of pushing the envelope, right?
It really, it's probably, out of all the films we've worked on, it's probably the one that we felt like once we put it out, it's definitely going to bring up a lot of conversation, which that's what we wanted. And it definitely has, and we've gotten the good feedback, the bad feedback, but most importantly, it's brought up a conversation that we always enjoy whenever we bring our movies out. Is that hopefully it brings up conversation and it brings up different topics and it has people talking.
Absolutely.
And we're happy that this film, like the other ones, definitely has.
My husband and I just finished
working the San Luis Obispo Film Festival that was just in the past few weeks, and
Oh, nice.
it's always cool to get to be a part of it, because we see stuff that we wouldn't normally see. We see shorts, we see, indie
No,
films, all
definitely.
that sort of stuff. And you're right. These films create conversations. They put people in a space, and it's always so interesting because I work a lot of the times I work as a film host. So that means that we make sure people get into the theater. We give them the ballots for the voting for the best films, all that sort of stuff. And as people leave the films, and they're out in the hallways, those are the conversations I enjoy the most. Even though most of the time I'm just eavesdropping, because it's like you get to hear the reactions and you get to see the passion that some people, walk out of a film and see, and all that beautiful stuff. So let's kind of dive in. Where I know you've answered this question probably 100 times, but
it's been a while.
Yeah, but there had to be something that said. I mean, I'm going to be honest. This is kind of like 50 Shades of Gray with some like even deeper twists in it. At least
well, we always call it the gay Get Out.
Yeah.
Because it does deal with race, and it does deal with uncomfortable situations. And our lead character has a get out situation happening to him.
So for the listeners, what do you specifically mean by like a get out situation? I know what it is. Yeah.
So pretty much the story is we follow a young African-American artist, gay artist, Thomas, who deals with, he's into animation, like a cartoon artist, and that's his choice of art. And he gets caught up with an older white gentleman who is into BDSM and race play, and it's something new to Thomas. But of course, he gets intrigued and follows through with it, and ends up being captured by this man after an encounter, which seems pretty, kind of innocent in the BDSM world, right. But it turns into something else, and he gets trapped in his closet in this small little cage. Right. And then we just follow his journey. Of how he got there, because he's also in a relationship, and what he's dealing with at home in his relationship, and what he's dealing in his mind, mentally and physically and sexually. And we just kind of see this journey unfold and see where this all goes. And so
who came up with the concept? I'm always intrigued by this. Was
this was my business partner, Dane Joseph. He had thought of this concept of dealing with race play because he thought it was so intriguing, so interesting. That it's a topic that a lot of people don't talk about, but it occurs especially in the gay community with people of color. And so he thought, okay, let me see what I can do. And I think he started off with it as a play, and then it evolved into a whole feature film. Gotcha. And once he made it, he wrote it, he was ready to direct it, but at the time we were in the middle of producing another film called Boy, starring Anthony Rapp. And then he decided to step back as director, and then I stepped in and directed it, which for me was like, this is going to be some heavy duty stuff that I'm not quite sure if I'm even ready to do. But I think visually, that's what really intrigued me, really made me want to continue. And I knew the message of the story was really strong. Sure. Something that we really wanted to make. So yeah, and then we produced it, and we made it, and it was the same process like our other indie films, rather quickly, and with just a really good, talented crew and a group of actors.
So for you, as you were making this, well, first of all, let's kind of clarify for those of you who are listening. I mean, I'm hoping you can put two and two together, that race play would be, it's going to be someone of color, potentially with someone who is white. I'm going to go at the highest level. It could be many different ways this plays out, but it could be reversed as well. But it really is all about that the play or the sexual excitement or energy comes from some form of, it's all tied to the race. It could be master slave. It could be
definitely.
It could be any
Yeah.
twists on that. It could be concubine. It could be any of these sort of things. And I guess from my perspective, it's probably the truest form of yet just another fetish, which so many people get hung up on. It's like, why do you need that to have sex? Well, why do you need to have anything to have sex? I mean, most people don't just have sex. You need to have love. Well, why do you have to have love to have sex? Or maybe you want to feel intimate to have sex. I mean, I don't believe most of us have sex just because, okay, I'm horny, let's have sex. There's something else that's like, oh, I really want to do this.
Yeah.
This doesn't mean for most people, and I think this is where I want to kind of clear some air, not that I am in the BDSM world, but I have friends who are coaches in that world. What you need to understand is this is just another thing of what turns some people on. It's how they enjoy doing things. And so many people get hung up on this stuff. And like, oh my God, they're sick, they're evil, they're da 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 da.
Yeah. And for me, it's a very uncomfortable subject matter. And even for Dane, who wrote it, it was an uncomfortable subject matter. But he was intrigued by it because also he wanted to kind of delve into what the community, what they think about it, and what other gay Black men and Latino men think about it. And that's actually, once the film was done and we introduced it to audiences, it was, and a lot of the audiences were, I mean, the film first screened at the Harlem Film Festival in New York. Wow. So just to see predominantly, people of color in the audience. And then we did the New York Latino, the HBO New York Latino Film Festival. So there was another crowd of like gay, Latin and Black men in the audience. So it was interesting just to hear their response. And for a lot of them, they had either issues with it or they did it. But it was good to get it at least out there, because I think it is a little bit taboo, and it's also a little, people don't quite understand it or don't quite agree with it. But it's something that I think, and I've always been interested with race and the LGBTQ community and what, sometimes a lot of people don't like to talk about it, but I think it's something that
it needs to be talked about. It should. It needs to be talked about, because I know, being a coach in the community, that when I have a person of color, there's a whole nother layer of coming out and being who you are, because there's already a marginalized community piece to it. A lot of times, especially in the Latino and Black communities, there almost always is some depth of religious piece that's really tied to it. And then there's the familia piece, because family is family and you don't, da da da. So it comes with a lot of stuff that as a person of color or, brown people, there's more to this than, I hate to say it, than, I'm a white guy coming out of the closet. There's a whole different thing that happens. So
and racism in the LGBTQ community is huge. A lot of men don't acknowledge it, or they don't realize that it's a big thing. And for me, that was the most important thing to bring out is the racism within our community and the separation, the segregation within that. And I think, when we would go to different panel discussions, that was something that we would always go into of especially because in the film, the character deals with online, with Grindr and stuff like that. And so a lot of the terminology of like, what are you into, and this and that. And for me, I've always been fascinated by that, how you do get that in the community online, whether it's not into them or not into Black or not into Asians, and just that whole separation and where that comes from, or that it does exist, and a lot of people don't like to address it all the time, because they get really uncomfortable. I was at a panel discussion in Fire Island in New York, and one of the moderators was like, well, is there a topic that I should bring up? And I was like, you should bring up like racism in the community and what people think about it. And in the audience, it was like Black and white men. And right away, everybody got really uncomfortable, and they did not want to talk about it. They thought, I think it's going too deep into something else, and we don't want to offend anybody. But I thought it was so interesting that that was the reaction, that people can talk about sex and penises and all
Right, exactly.
kinds of stuff. But when it comes to racism in the community, it's such a sensitive subject. But it just shows you that it's very, very much there, and it's very
Which
much
really
thriving and alive.
Right, which really parallels so much of what's going on in our country right now, except there's a lot of being talked about racism, but it doesn't make anybody feel comfortable. And the more we talk about it, at least my perspective, the more we talk about it, and it's kind of like the LGBTQ journey. The more we talk about it and normalize it, the more we can do with it. Now, I'm not saying let's normalize racism, because there's nothing normal about racism, but the more we can normalize the conversation, like we need to have these discussions. We need to make this known. And the reason I was laughing in the background as you were talking a minute ago is like, I see this on the apps all the time. It's like, I'm not into this, and so on mine, I say, I'm not into knots. It's really simple. However, I will say I'm not into smokers, and I'm not into uncut cocks. Okay. There's pretty much where I go, guys. Sorry, I got to go there. But, yes, so I just outed myself as, yes, I'm on the app, so I don't really care, because I'm very transparent about this. But it always intrigues me, and I get it. We all have what we're into. But here's the thing, and I wish guys would get this, and I'm going to get on my soapbox for a moment, folks. And those of you who aren't like gay, I want you to listen to this, because I think this happens in the heterosexual world too. But I need you to think about, if you were more transparent, and I realize some people don't want to be transparent on the apps because they may be down low or whatever. But if you had your picture on an app, and you happen to be a person of color, or you happen to be somebody who is white, and you're looking at somebody's picture, you can pretty much sort and sift, because, okay, if you're not into Asians or blacks or whatever, well, then if you look at somebody's picture and you can tell they're Asian, black, whatever, then you just don't even need to hit them up. Okay, let's be real here, folks. And so much of this racism that starts to show up is because we're not being transparent with each other. And I'm also going to be the first one to stand up and say, bring me a brown boy anytime, and I'll be first in line. I mean, my husband is Hispanic. I find Hispanics and black men very, very attractive. That doesn't mean I don't find white guys attractive either. But this racism that shows up is as damaging as saying, oh, and I don't like femmes either. I mean, it's just, we just continue to push our own community down instead of raising each other up. I'm not saying I agree. If you're not into something, you're not into something, but let's do it in a way that builds each other up, not pushes each other down.
Yeah. Well, then you also have to ask yourself, what is the real reason behind that when you post things like not into black men or Latinos or not into Asians, because I think at the beginning I would get a lot of conversations with guys saying, oh, it's a preference. I'm just stating that is my preference. It doesn't mean I'm racist or anything. And so I think that was people were hiding, men were hiding behind that, behind being like, well, it just means, and then my other friends would say, I think there's something deeper than that. I think there's something really wrong when you do post stuff like that. Like, where does that come from?
Absolutely.
What do you really, and I think for an LGBTQ community, I guess it's like, oh, I can't be racist because I'm gay and I'm already ostracized and I'm already in the other category. So I'm already, I love everybody, but deep down inside,
there's something there.
Anybody, yes, there's something there. So that conversation is always good to have. And
absolutely.
To kind of bring up, and I think with the film, we were able to bring that out and see what those fetishes are, and why people gravitate towards that.
And there's even, I mean, I'm going to say racism, which really isn't what it is, but there is even kind of there's a pushback to people who are into fetishes, which is its own form of, oh, you're weird, you're different. And it's like, can we just respect that? Quite honestly, if it's not hurting me in my life, then why the fuck should I even give a shit? You know, that's the thing. It's like, if that's what somebody's into, that's what somebody's into. And yes, there are a lot of fetishes I'm like, I don't get it, but that doesn't mean I have to. It's just not my thing.
Yeah.
And too often, you know, and we could go clear over to the whole religious right sort of stuff. It's like, okay, you people just need to get laid. But, you know, it's one of those things. I think the more we open up to having these dialogues and being honest about it, the more we can begin to understand, because empathy, compassion, and understanding in any realm is what it's all about. And you said something a little bit ago, Daniel, about, you know, even for yourself, it made you uncomfortable as you started to go through this. And I'm curious, you know, what was some of the discomfort you had as you were filming this?
Well, especially with this, you know, when you're dealing with black and white, and you're dealing with like the whole master and slave, and it is uncomfortable. I think it would like the same, like if you were doing a movie about slavery and you had to have, you know, your white actors act a certain way and say certain lines that are very there are things that you're like, you're not supposed to be saying that kind of stuff,
right?
But
because
this is the script, this is the character. Your
head knows different, I think, is what you're getting.
Your head knows different, and you're taught to not, you know, interact with people that way. But in the film, this is how these two characters interact. And luckily we had really great talented actors who Joe McDonald was one of them, who played the white guy, and he really took to it and knew the responsibility of the role, and knew that this was how the character was going to be. So for him, it was like, well, you know, if I need to go there, I need to go there. But yeah, watching it is uncomfortable. But yeah, a lot of people are into that. Those, I've seen it in other documentaries. There was an HBO document. What is it? Real Sex? They used to be on HBO, and there was one about BDSM and S&M and all that, and role play. And there was this, I guess, this S&M kind of club in Wall Street, and you know, you would have like this rich black executive or a straight man who was into race play, and he's, you know, being, you know, chained up and led around by this white woman who's calling him, you know, his slave and all this. And I remember looking at that and be like, wow, here's like this very powerful black man, and his fetish is that he likes to be tied up and treated like a slave, and that's his fetish, and that's what he's into. And I thought, well, that's, hey, to each his own. A lot of people will look at that and say, you know, what is really behind that? Why is he really into that? What is that about? Which is, you know, that's between that person.
Exactly.
And
that's between that person and what they want, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm curious.
Go ahead.
I'm curious too, which is kind of the same question I just asked you, but what came up for you as a Latino man making this film? Because I know the intellectual things we just talked about, it pushes your envelope, you know, and I guess I can kind of lead into this question a little bit. I remember a few years ago, I had a client. I'm going to figure out how I say this without like,
we'll name him Bob.
Yeah, no name, but definitely was a man of color. And we started coaching, and things were going pretty well. And he showed up for one coaching thing, and he said, I need to know if it's okay if I call you coach. I'm like, sure. You know, like, whatever, you know. And it suddenly got in the middle of the session, and he's like, well, coach, I need you to tell me exactly what to do. I need you to tell me how horrible I am. I'm like, we are going somewhere. That this whole thing just got, this whole thing just got derailed. And so I stopped and I said, you know, basically, okay, we'll call him Daniel. There we go. I said, I'm not really sure what's going on here, but I feel like this isn't a coaching session. And he said, it's not. I'm like, okay, then we need to reschedule when you're ready to be here. And he goes, please don't hang up. I'm like, why? And he goes, because I'm just about to get off.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, oh, wow. And I realized this was, and it was kind of weird. And so I said, you know, I can't do this And I literally ended the coaching relationship at that point in time. And he did write me at one point and say, I'm really sorry. I should let you know about this, but you know, it's always been my thing. And you've been so good at getting me to come forward with my stuff. And he goes, I didn't use my head when I thought, you know what, I'm just going to go into this session. And what he wanted was to come out about being a fetish around, you know, coaches and sports and people of authority to make him do things. And, you know, it worked out, because I basically got him connected to a therapist to work through some of that stuff. But it's just an interesting space. So as you were doing this, and I know things do come up in the Latino community about being gay and all this sort of stuff, was there something that specifically from a Latino perspective, I know as a man and, you know, all this, but was there something specifically that kind of rubbed you, which probably is just the race thing, the color thing?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what things I've encountered. Nothing in the Latino community that I have. I think personally for me at the beginning, as a young gay guy, I think I would go into like, oh, this is what I prefer. I prefer only this, and I knew I would. My friends would be like, oh, well, that's a little off that you would say that, or you were only into, you would say you would have your preferences that you're into only certain types, and where does that come from? And at first I took it as a preference, but then for me, I think it was a part of a fetish of like, at first I was like, oh, I wasn't around a lot of white guys, so I would say, oh, my preference is I like white guys. And I think my first boyfriend was a white guy, so I went into that and it was like, oh, with Latinos, you know, it seems like it's too close to home. I feel like I'm with like my cousin or my you know, my brother, you know, physically. Just I wanted something. For me, it was like I wanted something different. For me, like a white guy was very exotic. But then I had to look into that and be like, well, Danny, where is that coming from, and why do you feel that way? I think it was because it was something so unfamiliar. But now older, now, you know, I'm through the whole spectrum. And open to everything.
Yeah,
and
I think
I've experienced everything.
Well, and I think this is why these kind of movies are important.
Yeah, definitely.
Even if you don't like it, you know, and I would encourage, and we're gonna have a link to the trailer on the website for this one. I would encourage you to just watch this, folks, simply because you will see another side of humanity that for some people, it's totally, this is what they want. Now, yes, I know the storyline, you know, kind of takes it another direction, which we don't want to blow, but, and blow not meaning any pun intended there, but, it's the more we learn, the more we know, whatever that phrase is by whatever that, you know, NBC or somebody always has that going.
The more you know.
Yeah, I think it's so true, because the more you know, the more you can understand. And the more you can understand, the more compassionate you can be. It doesn't mean you have to agree.
Yeah, and there's no judgment on it. And I think for us, we didn't want to put any judgment on it. Ironically, we did think that like the whole race play was going to be huge and controversial, and it was going to bring up a lot of, you know, mixed thoughts on it, which it did. But what we also got was mostly some backlash on the BDSM stuff that was in the film, because the lead character, the white guy, that's his form of kind of trapping these guys or like going into, because he's into BDSM and S&M. Sure. And for us, we totally we respect the community, the BDSM community, and we know they're a responsible group that there are certain rules to BDSM to make it safe, to make it so everybody's enjoying it, so it's not something that's just, you know, wildly people are just being chained up without their will. You know, it's something where, and a lot of people watching the film would be like, well, that's not how the BDSM community is, and that's not really the rules of how BDSM works or S&M. And there was a lot of explaining on our end of saying, well, this is more of a character using BDSM and S&M in a very wrong way. So if anything, you're right. This isn't the correct way, and there is a proper way, and there is an etiquette and rules to these groups, which we totally respect, and we totally like, you know what, that's something that they formed, and it's become something that people can respect and join in, and do it in a safe manner. But obviously our character does it in a very unsafe, unresponsible way.
So I'm curious, Daniel, because it's such a controversial subject and it took you to some places in yourself, is there something you learned making this film that you're kind of surprised that you learned about yourself?
About myself? Is not entire. I mean, I think now I'm kind of settled in to the kind of person I am, probably sexually and mentally. So I think it was good for me to do it at this point, because I think I was in a good state of mind to at least be like, okay, this I can separate and not go into like, well, maybe I'm going to go into this world. I'm not into race play. That's something that I've encountered in terms of like either guys who want to date me or have been like, oh, for me, it's been the opposite, because I have more Middle Eastern features. So I do get that a lot, where guys would approach me, oh, I thought you were Middle Eastern, and I'm really into Middle Eastern guys. And so I'm like, oh, and then I have to be careful and be like, well, I hope you're not, dating me or looking at me because I'm a Middle Eastern guy, because I'm not. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to fulfill that fetish for you.
But I think that's beautiful what you just shared. It's like this awareness of what you saw in yourself, that there was an openness to at least see it, and then a validation of, no, this isn't for me, because you and I both know in our own community, and I'm specifically speaking to the gay male community, at times something like this can show up and somebody will jump into this purely out of, okay, this will make me feel wanted and desired. And then suddenly they get caught into it, and it isn't actually at all what they want, but they're doing it simply to have some form of acceptance, which happens all the time. I think, I hate it when I generalize like this, but I'm going to do it just because I work so much closer with gay men. I think this happens more often than gay men ever want to admit. They jump into something because, okay, this will make me feel accepted. This will make me feel wanted and desired.
Definitely, yeah.
And it's like an addiction. And, that's why there's some heavier drug abuse in our community, the alcohol abuse, the dangerous sex play, whatever that may look like. And again, this is why I think films like this are so good, as here's some eye openers first to form acceptance. And secondly, it's a great eye opener to, here's what can happen if you're not fully in touch with yourself and you're only diving into something to dive into it. Now, that doesn't mean don't go explore it. I mean, I think exploration is a beautiful thing for anybody in any form of life. But I also think these kind of films can be flipped to, and now here's the caution, if you're not really understanding why this is why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah, and I think that's what it comes down to, is that's why, hey, therapy is a huge thing that a lot of people should do more often, and really discuss it, and discuss, the reasons why they do the things they do. Because I'm constantly doing that with myself, in any decisions that I make or anything that I do, where it's like, well, why am I doing this? Why is it that it's, where is it coming from?
Right.
And you have to constantly ask yourself that. I feel like, because otherwise you're just, you're blindly going into things, and it can go into very dangerous, you put yourself in dangerous situations because you're just trying to satisfy whatever that is.
Yeah. So you are a Latino gay male in your 30s, and
in my 30s,
heading towards that big 4-0. I know you're waltzing that way. And I have to be really honest, guys, and I'm going to share this with Daniel. I liked my 30s. I loved my 40s. So
great. I want to hear all of it. I want to hear all.
Well, honey, that would take that would take about 10 podcasts to really talk about. No, I did. It was, part of it was because that was when I came into myself as a gay man. I came out of the closet at 36, but it was when I came into myself. It's when I found my career, this career that I'm doing now with podcasting and speaking and coaching and all that stuff. I feel like I stepped into being a better father. Definitely was much better as far as a relationship person. That's when I met my husband.
Yeah.
And I don't know, there was some, and now that I'm in my 50s, I like them. I like the 50s too. It's a different thing. I'm much more settled. I'm like much more, yeah, fuck it. I really don't give a shit what you think. So that's probably a good thing. But I'm also settled in a direction of, hey, I'm enjoying just doing what I'm doing because I'm doing what I'm doing. There's no like, oh, this got to make me, hugely successful. It's, hey, I'm enjoying life. But back to you. That was all about me for a moment there. But as a guy who's, you're in your, late 30s, you've got these films that you've produced. What is something that you feel like you now know, having done these interesting different kinds of films that push envelopes, that you now know makes you a better man? I'm just curious. I know, big question.
I think it's being comfortable with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that's always hard for anybody to finally be comfortable in their own skin and themselves and have that self-love that everybody talks about that they need. And I think I'm settling into that. I have my moments of anxiety of like, I'm in my 30s. What's my life? Where's it going? What's happening? But I feel I'm old enough to remind myself that it's okay to just keep doing what you're doing, to just have the patience and to not stress out and to enjoy it and enjoy where you're at, even if it's in a place where nothing is happening, where you're just kind of living, and it's fine. It's not always going to be like that, but enjoy that right now you're just standing still and you're just enjoying life and enjoying your friends and your family and just your everyday life, and to not feel that pressure of like, what's the next thing, what needs to happen. Because I feel like when you're standing still and you're just in yourself, I think that's when you open yourself up to like, okay, what's around me, and you're more aware. And
absolutely.
Now I'm in that point in my life now where I can kind of just be aware, almost like when I was younger, and just kind of sit still and just be open to whatever comes my way,
right,
and receiving it.
That's awesome.
And so, I'm a little nervous about going into my 40s because, of course, for me, I think as an artist, you go into this state of mind of like, where am I going artistically, and what is my career, and what do I want to do next, and what should I do? And of course, you start to compare yourself to other people and where they are in their life. And I have to constantly remind myself, stay in your lane. Just stay in your lane, and be thankful that you're there and you're going down your own path.
Yeah.
And everybody has their own path, and just keep looking straight ahead.
Well, I don't know if this will help, but I'm mid 50s. I'm 55, and
all of it. I love all the advice. I love all.
Yeah. And the same questions come up as I'm in a transition of, okay, I know where I'm going, kind of, but I'm doing some different stuff. And wow, is this going to be the right thing? And the thing I will say is stress does not equal joy. And the more you can really live by that anytime you start feeling stressed, realize it's taking all the energy away from you being able to experience joy. It's kind of the best prescription you can have. And, it's something that it took me a long time to start to learn. I still struggle from it. Obviously, as you're launching new things, doing new things, looking for new things, there's always a level of stress. But I know for me, the more I realize that every ounce of energy I give to stress is an ounce of energy that I'm not experiencing joy. And it's a really amazing thing when you do that. So any new projects before we wrap up you want to talk about?
Anything? Well, right now we're developing a lot of new things with Nova Novus. We are going back into the web world.
Cool.
Dane Joseph had created with two of his best buds the show called Drama Queens, which is still on YouTube, and it's still on our YouTube channel, Nova Novus channel. And so it was a big hit. It was one of the first gay one of the first web series out
Yep,
there when
yep.
it was first coming out. And we feel like, okay, we still have our audience or subscribers, and so we kind of want to delve back into the web series world and see what's there. And so
That's
just a
awesome.
lot of developing, a lot of writing, and just getting things going and getting things on paper, so then we can start
go forward.
production and filming again.
Cool. Well, it's
But
been
yeah, you
great
can
to-
find all of them. Sorry, you can find
Yeah.
all the films on Amazon and Nova Novus.
Yep.
We're online website
Cool.
and all that. I'm sure
And
they'll find it on your site.
we'll have all the links to that stuff, Daniel, so that everybody can connect. And I invite everybody to really, truly go connect, follow him, follow all the stuff he's doing. And it's always good to talk to you, man. It's always good.
It's great. I love it.
And we need to do it again more frequently. It's been a couple of years, but life moves,
right?
and things happen. But I'm really happy for everything you're developing and all the success you've had. And thanks again for sharing yourself full force.
Full force. No,
yeah.
I'm glad to.
Yeah,
It's always fun coming on.
Cool. And that's going to be a wrap for us, folks, for this week. But stay tuned. We'll be back in just a few more days with another episode of Life Uncloseted.
All right, there you have it. Another episode of Life Uncloseted has come to an end, but that's okay. We're going to be back in just a couple of days sharing more stories, tips, tricks, and wisdom for helping you live your life uncloseted. And you know what? You can share too. Just take a few moments if you like and if you believe in this podcast and share it with someone you know today. Share it from your phone, go share it on iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you are. Maybe even give us a rating and review, because you know what? It's all about the planet living their life uncloseted. I'm Rick Clemens, host of the show and the guy who helps you make those big, bold moves. And I hope you never stop stepping out, stepping up, and stepping in to living your life uncloseted. Catch you real soon. Take care, everyone.